Okay, and just see what happens. All right. For attendees, we're missing Liz, Heather, and
Selena.
Selena. Thank you. Um, Bethany, Kathleen, myself are here with Sarah, Kathleen Walker, and Tyler Deems for roll call. And I know we have 3 attendees in the waiting room. And if any of you have items that you would like to discuss that are not on the agenda, please raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand and introduce yourselves when Sarah calls on you.
I don't see any raised hands, Lynn.
Okay. So
wait, Jack just raised his hand. Let me,
Sarah, I hate to interrupt you. How many active board members do you have on the library board? Do we even have a quorum to hold an official meeting at this point?
We currently have 6 board members and 3 of them are here.
Okay.
What's required for a quorum?
Majority. Don't really have a majority here, although I want to be respectful that there are people here that want to speak. So maybe I'm making this up on the fly. Maybe this is more of just an informal conversation and not an official board meeting, because there is not a majority in attendance.
Okay, let's go ahead and hear what Jack has to say.
Oh, I was just here to tell you that I'm here.
Oh, well, nice to have you.
Thank you.
So I think we should probably just skip the formal agenda and kind of maybe just jump into the meat of what this group wants to talk about. And I apologize, I don't mean to hijack the meeting right now, but I just have 1 or 2 points to make briefly before we do that, if you don't mind. I know that the original intent here was to have Mayor Pulliam and have the discussion around non-city residents, but library district members and their voices heard for specifically capital use of district funds for capital purposes. I think that maybe the best approach, given that there's not a quorum, that the mayor is not in attendance, just free flow of dialogue. I'm happy to take notes. I can report back at the next council meeting during my city manager report and share what I believe to be the library board's position on this matter. Councilor Walker would obviously be in attendance and could help add any pertinent information that I don't bring up during the city manager report or fill in any blanks. But what's the group think about that?
Tyler, should I allow the other two participants to speak if they want to?
I think that's fine. I mean, we're kind of dancing on the line of what a real public meeting is versus the informational session, I guess we're going to call it right now. But
okay.
Yeah, I think if there's other feedback from the public, we can take that.
Well, since I was requested to speak, I will. My name's Grover, and I'm on the Oak Lodge, Clackamas County Library Board, and I'm also a Library District Advisory Committee representative. And I'm a big supporter of all the work that we do in our libraries. And I'm very interested in this conversation because I live in unincorporated Clackamas County. And a lot of what this topic is about is the opinion between what happens to the money that's collected from unincorporated and being passed through cities where we have no vote as to what the city chooses to do the funds, as opposed to what the measure 3310 made as a original promise. But you guys already know all that, but that's why I'm here. And I'm in conversations like this whenever there can be.
All right, I'm gonna unmute the final person. It's Jerry McMahon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm here to support the library, the Hoodland Library as well, and their funding. I want us to see equal treatment with all the libraries. I'd like to be included in the equal treatment for funding. The Hoodland Library, not me, but. Okay, thank you.
Kathleen?
I'm wondering if maybe we should have two discussions, Tyler, because the one issue is where are we on the Hoodland rent request? And then separately is this question of the IGA amendment that is being discussed amongst the cities, and I'm not sure how you wish to segregate those two discussions.
Yeah, I can do a brief update. Sorry, thought I was muted for a moment, not out of Zoom practice. The Hoodland rent update has not been taken up with the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners at this time. It's still on their upcoming discussions to be had, but is not currently scheduled. And so that's the only update that I have in that regard. And oh, I'm sorry.
Well, and perhaps this is for another meeting, but I actually approached Commissioner Schrader at the candidates forum, and I let you know about that, Tyler, that and I did that with Commissioner Schul's approval and consent, since it was his motion that was tabled when in January, and I asked Commissioner Schrader to please support the motion and asked her to speak to Commissioner West. But I'm wondering if perhaps I should contact Administrator Schmidt again, just to incite some activity and doing it in a very friendly way, but just asking for an update.
I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for an update. The update that I got was that it just hasn't been scheduled yet at this time. So
alternatively, should we seek to meet with Commissioner Schrader at some point to talk to her?
maybe let's chat offline about that or in a smaller
Okay.
group setting. I think what you've done so far in encouraging her to speak with another commissioner is probably the best approach for the time being. But we could maybe dive into that a little bit deeper.
Another thing I would like just to have on the back burner is whether we should involve the Mountain Times at some point. We do have an election coming up, and perhaps, you know, by indicating community interest in this equal treatment, that might also give us some leverage. I'm not suggesting that right now, but I just want that on the possibilities.
Sure.
Because we've been languishing for over a year and a half at this point.
Hasn't been that long.
Yes, it has. November 2022.
When's the election? Is it May 6th?
27, I think.
Oh, okay. We have some time.
In the
then.
in the 20s.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, May 21st. Which is just around the corner.
Right. So could I take the lead on the question of the IGA? Is that okay with everybody? The reason why we had asked to speak to the mayor is because the library board at the, I guess it was the January meeting, all agreed that they would like to send a letter to other library boards encouraging the boards to ask the commissioners to put to the voters the question of whether the library district should be modified from a service district, which is what it legally was when it was passed in November 2008, and what the voters voted on, versus it now potentially being transformed into what would be a capital district, in which some of the district revenue could be used by cities to fund capital improvements in city-owned buildings with library district revenue. To change the library district requires a modification of the master order because it's being made into a new beast. The Board of Commissioners has the power to do that, but if it does that, it's actually subject to what is called a remonstrance. If 15,000 voters question the decision, they could actually force the BCC to put the question to the voters. Our sense was that when such a large proportion of the library district is unincorporated, it's more than 44%, if I'm 45%, that proportion of the district should not be overridden without consent. In fact, all the voters should be able to consent to this change. So the purpose of the letter was to ask other library boards to similarly encourage the BCC. We didn't know whether we had the right to send this letter out as an advisory board to the other boards. So it was suggested that we should speak to the mayor first to see what his opinion was on that. And if the opinion was that it needed to go to the city council for the city council's approval for us to take this step, that we would do so. So it's now, almost 2.5 months since we proposed the letter, and we haven't done anything with it because we haven't had the opportunity to speak to the mayor or to the other city councilors other than Councilor Walker. And that's the question is, may we proceed with our letter and also encourage the city to take the position in these pending discussions amongst all the cities that all the voters should be asked this question of the transformation of the library district from a service district to a capital district, if that's what the cities say they want to do. So that's the question. I think, Sarah, is that a sufficient description? Okay.
So if I were to bring this up, or if Councilor Walker and I jointly will figure out the fine details there, but if this were to be brought up at the next city council meeting, the library board is first and foremost seeking approval from the council to send a letter to other library board members of other Clackamas County libraries, with the approach of, paraphrasing to be brief, I guess, but all voters should be able to answer this question of how library district funds should be used, not just city councils making those decisions.
Right. Well, the alternative that's proposed is that the BCC make explicit that capital use is not permitted, and then that ends the discussion, which is the alternative that is presented.
Tyler, can you talk, or I guess I'd like to hear from Bethany and Tyler. Bethany, what is the status, I guess, at the last LDAC meeting you attended regarding this issue?
So we haven't had an LDAC meeting in, what is it, Kathleen, 18 months or something? Like a long time. So there's one coming now on May 20th. And that is when they're going to be discussing the rewriting of the IGA, correct, Kathy?
Well, the way it was posed in the agenda is that the county will report
Like on where they're at.
on its pending discussions with the cities. That's all we know.
Yeah, so I don't think there's been much or any discussion amongst LDAC at this point. And I don't even know if there will be in May, honestly.
I think there will be a report.
We haven't gotten a formal agenda yet, so I guess hopefully.
Right. Although Rick Peterson did put it in his cover note that this,
Yeah.
it's likely to be covered. the last meeting of LDAC was the one that approved sending the letter to the BCC saying that LDAC and this was in May or June last year, saying that LDAC needed instruction on these three issues, one of which was the fact that one of the libraries is using a substantial amount of library district revenue for the construction of a building.
That was just last year.
Mhm.
Oh, and which library is that?
That's Happy Valley. They have taken $7 million from library district revenue since 2015 and are in the process of actually building it's an annex, I think is the way it's called. It's an extension to the existing building that the county gave them, on top of all of that. And then the other questions were just allocated costs and some, I don't even remember the third question, but it was primarily this issue of capital, whether capital and debt could be paid from a service district revenue stream, which is a legal question, which is why we put it to the county, is hoping that they would give us the legal answer. Now, the legal answer that has been provided by the county lawyer in January of this year, Kathleen, was that the master order as originally drafted in 2009, it says was intentionally focused on providing funding for library services because at the time there was a capital district overlap and there could not be a capital district for the library district. So the county's position through its lawsuits has been that a capital use does not fit within the service district as it exists, that it would take a master order change.
So it sounds like that's what they're doing, is they're working with the cities. Now, help me out, there's like 13 cities, is that right?
There's technically 12 cities, and one of those cities is the county, because they are now the library city for the Oak Lodge library. And then Sandy, one city, covers 2 service districts, right?
So Mike, I guess what I understood was that for a change to the MOU to happen, a certain percentage, like 8 or something of the cities have to sign the MOU. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would be a modification to the intergovernmental agreement, but I will tell you, I question whether the cities have the authority to make that change.
Well, they've been changing it. I mean, there's been
They have
numerous.
changed the question of capital versus service. They've made some changes that related to management.
Right, yeah. I mean,
this question of capital versus service only, I'm not sure that the cities actually have the authority to make that change. Now, the BCC can cure it by unilaterally making a master order change. But I don't think the cities can, but I think they're going to the cities in part because they wanted to get some feedback from the cities.
Sure.
From an operational point of view. But of course the cities would say they want to use the money for capital. Who wouldn't? I mean, this was predicted 10 years ago by George Hoyt. It was actually predicted at the time we created the district that this was inevitably going to happen. So here we are.
I won't go into too much detail of private conversations that I've had, but I will say that I think Ms. Drain is correct in that, of course, the cities want the most flexible use of library proceeds. I think, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that desire, right? That cities have an interest in making sure we have libraries that are accessible, big enough to serve the population, have adequate materials. So I wouldn't say that there's, I shouldn't be arguing right or wrong. I wouldn't say that there's anything, any malfeasance in the desire to provide those services in the best way possible. I think there's just a differing opinion on how those services are provided. With that said, I think that Sandy's definitely in the minority of restricting the use of district funds for the conversations that I've heard or been a part of, precisely because people recognize the need of flexibility on those dollars to replace HVAC or roof or whatever else, because there isn't an adequate general fund to offset, those repairs that inevitably need to be had. So I guess I don't want to say that.
Leave a message and I'll get back to you when we can. Thanks.
Hi,
Sorry
Mike.
about-
At the tone, please record your message.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I lost my train of thought for a moment.
I apologize.
No, not at all. So I guess my point being that I think we're probably in the minority of library boards that are interested in, well, I shouldn't say library boards, in cities that are interested in reducing the flexibility of how district funds are spent. I do have a question though for the board members, and is the position of the 3 board members that are in attendance tonight the majority or unanimous position of the library board as a whole, or is this a concern from a handful of board members? I guess when this conversation comes before the council, it's helpful to understand if there's just 2, 3, 4 board members that have this position, or if this is a united decision from the board presenting this issue to the council.
Unfortunately, I don't think we know, as we have new board members that haven't been involved in the conversation. So I don't know if we can fully answer that.
Before those new board members were appointed, was there a,
I would say there was a
3
pretty
months
good
ago?
consensus. Yes, I would
Yeah.
say yes.
I think we all.
Actually,
Yeah,
they were both introduced to us at the meeting in which the letter was unanimously approved.
Mhm.
oh, they both were there?
Yes.
I mean, that's helpful information for me to have. I haven't reviewed those minutes, so I wasn't aware of that. I just want to make sure I understand the position of the board before I present any sort of information to the council, and then not have, adequate
Mhm.
information to share with how many board members or, the minority or majority. That's how the board feels. So yeah, Councilor Walker, to answer your specific question, I think that this position of trying to restrict the use of district revenue to only being, as Ms. Straight put it, a service district and not a capital district, I think we're in the minority currently. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think Sandy's been in a minority before of many other positions, and we've worked through that. But I also think that there's a certain level of decision making the council needs to make as far as is this a position that they want to pick up and take a stance on, or is it something that needs to be addressed directly with the Board of County Commissioners, since they are the governing body of the district as a whole.
And what was your, when you've met with the other city managers, what was the gist of their position on all this?
I mean, to summarize, I think it's generally what I sort of already noted, which is at some point in time, some sort of infrastructure issue is going to take place, whether it's mechanical, whether it's structural, whether it's something else. Many of the cities in Clackamas County are similar to Sandy, that we don't have a ton of just general fund dollars lying around, facilities replacement funds lying around to reinvest at that time. And so there is a desire to have flexibility in the way in which district funds are used, to ensure that our buildings are kept in, good working order, and we're able to provide those library services.
Mhm. Sarah, I can see that Jack and Grover both would like to speak.
I'm gonna unmute Grover first. He's at the top of my screen.
You're just playing favorites. I like it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the conversation, and I particularly want to stir in a piece that I know from our own library board, and I know from being on the Library District Advisory Committee. The design of the district in the first place was because there were many libraries coming to the county for augmenting funds before the 2008, before George and Jack and Kathleen and all those folks did all the work to cause the district to come into being, but it was designed to pay for, and I know there is that conversation that there was an overlap with another service, with another capital district, but it was clear, and we worked right up to when COVID happened to convene a task force to look at the long-term funding, and the library directors gave a pretty strong letter to LDAC saying that we need to plan for future funding, and our current funding stream for many of the libraries is insufficient. So the idea of introducing a free hand in using it for capital is further challenged by that. And then the other part is the money, as far as what the ballot measure says what it says. The voters agreed to be taxed under those conditions, and I do understand that the board order can override that, but the reason that they have been reluctant to do that is there are a number of people who suggest that's not what the voters voted for. So those are the two things I want to stir into the conversation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Grover. Jack?
I am muted.
Yes, you are.
Oh, good. Thank you. Well, Grover, I'm used to following you, so that's not an issue. Secondly, if you're wondering, the other district you're talking about was Estacada. That was the district that had the other correct thing. You couldn't do it. The other thing to bring this whole thing into focus is the way the ballot measure was written and the way it is. You cannot raise the rate. You have to go back and redo the whole process. And I find it kind of concerning that I'm sitting here listening and discussing whether or not we should do this when we've forgotten the voters. The voters were entered into a contract, a covenant, an agreement, whatever words you're more comfortable with, saying, okay, we'll tax ourselves, we'll send you the money, but you cannot do capital expenses. And you also cannot you can only bill administratively for direct costs to the library. For example, if you have a city council meeting and you have 10 departments, you can't charge each department a 10th unless you can't do the library unless you're talking about library business. So I just find it incredible that you're even discussing doing that when you have a deal or whatever with the voters, and you just dismiss the voters. Now, since you're dismissing the voters now, and if you're going to have to go back and figure out that the existing ballot or this district does not have enough money coming in, and I'm going to have to go back to the voters, who in their right mind, I would have a hard time supporting that. I love my library. Sarah knows that. But I mean, I take this personally because I was the treasurer of the PAC. I took all the money in from these people under the agreement that we're not going to do capital expenses, and we're not, and that's what we're going to do. And now you just indiscriminately decided, not necessarily you, but the discussion is coming up, hell with the people, hell with what we did. I mean, this sounds like, well, I better not say who it sounds like. You're just totally disregarding the people and don't care. And now, I think if you look in the short term, you might come out okay. But in the long term, if you're going to have to go back to the voters and ask for another one, and if the word gets out what you did to them the first time, I don't think they're going to pass it for you. But I just find it just I just don't like it. It's just not fair. And what's going on with people in government and everything else and taxes, least we can be fair. And this is not fair, going and building capital expenses with money you told the people you weren't going to do it to. Thank you for allowing me to give you a comment.
Thank you, Jack.
And I have to say, I'm in full agreement with that. That's why I voted to send a letter to all of the rest. It's not being a political animal. It seems extraordinary to me that if there's a question of the legality of what was promised to the voters, as Kathleen pointed out, it's a legal question. You have lawyers who can deal with that. Taking it back to city managers or I don't understand why that's the direction.
Lynn, I'm struggling with that too.
Yeah.
Because it was answered by the legal department, so that I keep coming to that as well. Like, why are we still doing this?
Going, yeah.
What,
You don't
what
have
are-
to keep asking until you get the answer that you want.
Yeah, yeah.
What are the, well, I mean, my understanding that I think they're doing is changing the MOU so that it is legal. I don't know, and I don't know if they can legally do that or not, but that's, I gather that's the approach they're using.
I understand that, but if the voters voted for one thing, they said the legal agreement was, yes, that is what they said, then I don't, whether they can legally change it, I don't know why they would do it.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. I think what I'd like to kind of hear from is, where are all these unincorporated people in all these other library districts? And why aren't they speaking up to their libraries, to the county commissioners and all that? That would help me to understand. I mean, because from where I sit, we're not doing it. We're not using our library
Right.
district monies on capital investment. So, and you all, and I mean, I think I've tried to understand the issues. The advisory board, library board advises the city council. And so, what's being asked is that we, kind of, we can kind of control what we do, but, do we want to kind of go up there and tell all these other cities how they should work, or tell the county commissioners what they should do about it? That's, when we're following the rules and not part of the problem, I'm feeling like the people where the violations of this agreement are happening should be much louder than us, I guess,
Kathleen?
May I? You're right, Kathleen, to be perfectly frank, but part of the problem with the way the library district is organized is that at LDAC, each city gets one person. That, from their library board, that person may or may not be an unincorporated person. The unincorporateds have no sway over the city representatives because they can't vote them in or out, right? So the whole the deck is stacked in a way against the unincorporateds, relying totally on the munificence, shall we say, or the generous behavior by the cities towards them. But for example, Sandy and Hoodland represent 11% of the unincorporateds. We are not an insignificant portion of the unincorporated base. If we added in Oak Lodge, because Grover's service area, the Oak Lodge service area is entirely unincorporated, that's 28% of the unincorporateds. One of the reasons for wanting to send the letter out was in fact to provoke the unincorporated representatives on library boards to take a more proactive role. It's a difficult situation, and Grover's probably going to speak to what he has done in his part of the world, hoping to motivate this. But I think another issue that people may not even realize, and I point you to the chart that was included with today's agenda. The unincorporated residents in 7 of the 13 libraries, and if you take out, the 3 wealthy libraries, we don't even need to talk about it. They provide substantially more money to the cities than their city residents do per capita. In over 50% of the revenue in 8 of the libraries is from the unincorporateds. But they have to whom do they go to have their interests represented?
Well, don't they have library boards just like we have, where they have hoodlum-like representatives or boring-like, I mean, you know what I mean, is they have representatives from outside the city limits on their library district advisory board to the cities, right?
Correct. You
So
are
that's
correct.
what I'm asking is, why aren't those people, just like what you guys have done, why aren't they going to their city council and saying, this is an issue, we feel strongly about this, and we think that you should be putting this to a vote? That's kind of why, that's what I'm trying to understand is, where's the outrage from all these people, the other 89% or whatever it is that live in the unincorporated areas, going to their city councils using the district representative, not necessarily the LDAC guy, but the other people on their boards to express their concern about that. That's, I want to find out more about what's going on in that way.
Yeah, my guess is they just don't realize it. And that's actually one of our reasons for wanting to send the letter out with the data of the chart to allow that discussion to occur.
Yes, to be clear, I don't believe that the library board was asking the city council to lead the charge again with all of the other cities. We were asking permission, if you like, to send that letter out to the other library boards. So it's slightly different. And I'm just going to remind Sarah that Jack and Grover have their hands up again.
This time I'm going to unmute Jack first.
Well, I think the question about why people don't know what's going on is because no one's saying anything. If you look at the LDAC members, a lot of them, most of them, I would say, weren't around at the very beginning, when the ballot was put on, when the service district was created, and now they don't know. And a lot of the people coming in, it's not like with Sandy where everybody's training whoever takes your place. So these people have no idea what the precedent is, what the original agreement was. And a lot of them, to be honest, are pretty rookie with pretty inexperienced. And so they're being directed by other people. To give you an example, not to pick on the chairman, but the chairman of LDAC represents Happy Valley. And Kathy's already told you Happy Valley is the biggest, whatever you want to call them, violator of using capital expenses. So I don't think it's not a problem that the people don't care. I think it's they just don't know. They don't know that that the county is talking about changing the rules of the ballot measure they passed. Thank you.
Grover?
Thank you. And I concur with what Jack just spoke of, and I want to back to your council person there, Kathleen. The library board members, first of all, as Jack said, most of them are not aware. Second of all, what we did when we created the report so that it would reflect the proportionality of the board members related city and unincorporated. A few have adjusted, many are still not to that point. And there is this sense of they're dealing with the issues that they know and have, and they don't recognize that they have a majority in finances, etc. And the other challenge I have, which is hard to speak to, is we don't get much access to the budgets until they're already approved. And if you recognize who we are all volunteers serving on these volunteer boards to give advice, and we're also taxpayers. So we're not representing the entity, we're representing the taxpayers. And I have great difficulty in most of the meetings. I'm also on the parks, not your parks, but North Clackamas Parks Advisory Board, and it's the same issue there. Most people are not aware of the issues, and they don't recognize that they're actually there to represent the people whose money it is. So case in point, You don't go to the city if you live in unincorporated because you have no say with the city manager, not faulting anybody, but you don't vote for them, so you don't have a voice. And that's been my experience. So that's my 2 cents to add to that. Thank you.
Well, I think I have a pretty clear understanding of what my next step is, which is just bringing this up with the council at the next council meeting. I think the conversation we've had tonight has been a great, opportunity to share perspectives. I don't think we're going to get much further though this evening beyond what we've already discussed, because no decision is going to get made since it isn't an official library board meeting, and we're not providing an official library board direction because there's not a majority of the library board here. But I've heard the three of you board members, and I understand that this, when the letter of conversation was initially discussed, there was a unanimous decision to advance it. Councilor Walker, I don't know if you want to chime in here, but I have no issue bringing this up at the next meeting to get initial sort of direction or gauge initial interest from the city council. But obviously, since Councilor Walker is the liaison, I want to make sure that she's comfortable with that approach as well.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to talk about it at the council. What our job is, because we provide services for far outside the city. So I'm not just looking at the city limits, okay? Our Parks and Recs department provides services for everybody. The community center, if the HVAC breaks there, we're going to come up with the money, whether it's general fund or, we do have this facility maintenance fund that we keep and all that. I see the library just like the community center. If something happens, we're going to find a way to fix it. We're not going to, necessarily, strip the library district funds to do that. So, because we're concerned about the level of services, and that's, I think, how it should be run. What's troubling me here, honestly, is that what you're asking the city council to do is to kind of take this stand for the entire county and, pressure other cities to, do something that they may not want to do, pressure the county commissioners to do something they may not want to do. And if this was the only thing out there that we were dealing with, I could say, let's go for that. This is how many of our folks feel. But what's troubling to me is, and I'm looking at this not just from the city, but from the Sandy area that we're serving, we got a lot of issues that we're dealing with, from the homeless issues and the need for more services. We've got the, I'd like to see them, do something with the library eventually, have some sort of vote or something in the future so that people that do need bigger libraries can do that. I want to see most of all, I want to see the Hoodland folks get treated fairly like everybody else. And so, and then there's the whole Parks and Rec, district consideration that we're also looking at to try to, kind of, address that issue. And so there's all these kind of bigger issues that are out there for us that, and then part of the rent thing, the Hoodland rent question is just one part of that. That I'm just really concerned about leading the charge over something that, we need, our priorities are these other big issues that we need those folks on our side. We need them to be our advocates. We need the $14 million of funding for our wastewater treatment plant. We need, support from the county to get that. There's just a whole lot of stuff that's going on that is much bigger than this one issue with the library that we're not even causing the issue or even doing the issue. And I get it that it can affect the whole population, but I'm also concerned that it's not necessarily the hill I want to die on, given all these other big important issues that we're trying to get some support for at least from the county commissioners, but also just, the tendency to not, I'm kind of live and let live, and I don't really want to kind of tell other cities about how they should, run their cities, I guess. It's kind of awkward for us to take a stand to do that. It'd have to be something pretty significant, I think, to tell other cities how they should do it, I guess. That's kind of where I stand, but, I'm happy to, have a discussion about it at the city council and get everybody's, voice in the picture, and have you all come and make a presentation or something, have testify at a meeting or something like that. So I understand how strongly you feel about it. I want you to know that my interest is trying to get the Hoodland rent, trying to in the future see about expanding the area footprint for the Hoodland Library, trying to, get us the bookmobile and those kind of things. So I don't want you to think like I don't support the library stuff, because I really do. I just feel like this one is a little bit of a stretch for me, but I do support Sandy and Hoodland libraries.
Kathleen, I see your hand has been up a couple of times.
No, it's okay. I understand what you're saying, Councilwoman Walker. I get it, but I don't think that people are truly understanding the seminal nature of this issue that's coming forward. This could seriously undermine the district if it's allowed to occur, especially if no new tax rate can be obtained. And we keep asking for a new tax rate to be discussed, and it keeps getting pushed somehow by the county to the side burner, probably because we hear city managers also don't want a lot of competing tax rates on the ballot. Understood. But then that means all we have is what we have now. If we don't protect what we have now, the city of Sandy may do what's right, but the city of Sandy benefits from how all the other libraries are run, how their collections are maintained, having this whole collective that we have. So I understand this may seem insignificant, but I don't think this is insignificant. And that's what we're trying to get across. It has long-term repercussions if this is not contained.
Is it true to say that in the short run, what we're asking, again, is not for the city council to lead the charge? We're really just saying, is it okay if the library board, sends this letter to other library boards? I'm kind of surprised that we need city council permission to do that anyway, but that's the question. And obviously the city council needs to know how we're approaching it, why we're concerned about it, what we want to do. But right now, in the short run, it's not asking Sandy to stick their head up above the parapet. It's the library advisory board, reaching out to their peer groups around to say, hey, are you aware of this? This is going on. We have these concerns. So that's the question. Is that okay for the library board to do?
Well, I think, for anybody to do anything individually on their own, of course, is totally appropriate and legal. But the library advisory board, the role for that is to advise the city council and to, represent the city council and the city itself for, the purposes of managing our Hoodland and Sandy library. And so when we start and again, I understand that this has bigger ramifications. I totally agree with you, Kathleen. What's troubling me though is that there's folks that are far more affected by this proposal directly in staffing and all that other stuff if they're using the library district funds. Those people need to be the ones to lead this charge because they're far more affected. And I would assume their librarians, their library directors are explaining all this to the library advisory boards that they're meeting with. I would expect that the LDAC representative is also explaining it to everybody on the board there. So that's where I'm just having trouble, again, doing what you want, individually, but when it comes to going to the, county commissioners and, representing more than yourself, clearly that's a different, that's kind of not the role of the Sandy Advisory Board. That's the role of the city staff.
Okay, we have a few raised hands that I think we need to get through. And then I think Tyler is right. We can't make any decisions tonight. We're just gonna kind of talk this through more and more. And we all know what the issues are. So let me have, I'm gonna unmute Jerry. And let
Few comments and back up a little bit to Councilman. About why
you need to choose to unmute.
am I not?
You're not unmuted.
Oh. Here I am. To address some of your comments, Councilman Walker, about how we seem to be more aware of the issues out here and the other unincorporated areas don't seem to be on the same page we are. I think it's our unique situation here of running the two libraries, saying Hoodland and Sandy. And we need to keep clarity on how the funds are going. And I don't think the other libraries have this unique situation here. And also it's the way the staff out here runs. They give us clarity. Also, going to the other cities and sending out the letter, I don't see us telling cities what to do. It's bringing an awareness to what's going on or fleshing out how they feel about what's going on. So that's what thank you.
Jack?
I'll say real quickly, two things. First of all, the reason that we're more aware of it here is because of the role that George played as far as running it, and my minor roles being the treasurer. And the second thing, I will just close with one comment that I've used my whole life. It says, "It is better to walk in truth rather than falsehood, though at times one seems to walk almost alone." Thank you for allowing me to participate and have input.
Grover?
Yes, thanks. And I agree with Jerry's Geraldine's comment about, because we also have two libraries. One is a city library and one is not in our current configuration. So we do have more awareness. But the part I really want to speak to is the library advisory board is not a city function. It is city and unincorporated. So it isn't, and I don't know how y'all do it up there, but it's very clear ours, and it is usually considered to be a city and usually managed by the city manager and or the library director who is a city employee, as opposed to having people who don't get to vote for any of those folks and they're on the library advisory board. And as Kathleen pointed out in her chart, many of us put in significantly more money than the cities do, and we have no say. So it isn't a matter of asking the city council, and I appreciate that we could do it individually, but the library board is not a City of Sandy board to my way of seeing it. It is for the library service area that Sandy covers, and then also the Hoodland part, but the Sandy has unincorporated residents who are on that board, and they are not city residents, and so they have no say over who they speak to. So that's the part I wanted to stir in there. Thank you.
Tyler, do you want to let people know when the next city council meeting is so that they can decide to attend if they're able?
Sure. Let's see, our next meeting is Monday, May 6th. The regular meeting starts at 7 p.m. It is a rather lengthy agenda already, so I couldn't give you a precise time as to when this topic might be discussed with the council, but sometime after 7 p.m. on Monday, May 6th.
Are you planning to put this as a decision item on the agenda, or?
No, I think I'd probably just take the approach of, I don't want to call it a straw poll because we don't really call it that in technical terms, but this issue was raised by the Sandy Library Advisory Board. Is there support from the council to authorize the sending of this letter? Obviously, I'd put in some more background information than the context there, right? But is there support to allow the library board to send this letter, or does the council prefer that the library board not take up this position as a board, let them just individually make their comments with the library boards? Mystery.
Well, actually, Bethany, did you want to say something? No. Okay.
No, I think I'm good.
To Councilwoman Walker's, that's such a mouthful. Point, this chart that we produced, we've thought that perhaps it might be an appropriate thing to disseminate at the next LDAC meeting, that Bethany will be it'll be her first sitting as the Sandy Hoodland rep, and that perhaps just sharing this chart when the IGA issue comes up for discussion might be a way of providing some education as well, just on the role of unincorporateds in the district. So if that isn't objected to, it would be nice to know that that would be okay. How do you feel about that?
You're talking to
Are
me.
you asking me specifically, or
Councilwoman Walker, who is obviously telling us to be careful of, what we do individually versus what we do in an official capacity.
Yeah, I don't want to step on Councilor Walker's toes, so I will let her shed some additional information here. I think I'm hesitant to provide a specific answer to that because I am not familiar enough with how LDAC and those meetings run and operate. My off-the-cuff response is that it's probably fine because you're discussing it in terms of how the population is made up within each service area. It's not necessarily a request or a position, but more of just factual in nature. But I want to think about that a little bit more before I, checked the box and said full charge ahead with that approach.
I think that meeting is May 20, Bethany, is that correct?
Yeah, I would appreciate if you could, or maybe Kathleen, you probably know too, it's what is the procedure, as this will be my first meeting. So if people do have something they want to present, like, are you thinking that you would email it to them? Like, what's the process for that?
Yeah, you would probably, something to be distributed can be sent ahead of time. If the agenda item is the discussion of the IGA, which I think is highly likely, you could ask the administrator to disseminate the chart ahead of time, or just copies can be made and it can be distributed at the meeting itself. But it'd be good, I think, if people could look at it ahead of time, because it might give them a chance to analyze it.
So maybe Tyler and Kathleen, if you want to think on that and see what you think about that idea, that would be helpful.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Does Grover have one more comment?
No, I was good. I just didn't put my hand down. Sorry.
Okay.
So shall I move to adjourn even though we don't have an official meeting?
How do we do that?
Good
We'll say
night.
goodbye.
Say goodbye.
Yeah, we'll just wave to each other and
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
I'm waving in the dark.
Thank you, Tyler and Kathleen, for making your time available.
Yes.
Thanks, you guys, for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate it.
And thanks
Thank
to
you.
all our attendees who were giving up their time this evening for this discussion.
It's a valuable conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you.
have a good evening.
With that,
Good night.
bye.
Good night.